And this first panel will focus on the challenges of building a global business during the fourth industrial revolution. And to lead the panel conversation, please welcome with me a veteran, if I may say so, business reporter and editor, the executive director of global business for Bloomberg, Jackie Simmons. And her key to success, she says, is remembering that none of us works alone. So great to have you here, Jackie. She's going to come out there in a minute, and let's give her a great applause.
Follow my face, thank you.
Good afternoon. So I guess I'll start by just making a point that when I saw the topic, building a global business in the fourth industrial revolution, I thought, wow, that's a brain teaser for me. That said, it's true that when you look and consider the rate of disruption that's occurring across all industries, you really also have to look at how that augments the disparities we know to be true. Gender inequality is one of them. So how do we as women and business leaders navigate that? That's a question we're going to tuck into. But first, I'd like to introduce the panel, or the panel will introduce itself. And we'll start at the far left with Anne.
So good afternoon, wonderful women and men, all here on a great mission for women in leadership. My name is Anne Ravanona. I'm founder and CEO of Global Invest Her. And we're on a mission to get more women entrepreneurs funded by demystifying the whole funding process. I look forward to telling you more later.
Good. I'm Belinda Parmar. I'm the CEO of the Empathy business. Great to be here, and big thanks to EY, who are always driving this agenda. So really happy to be here. Woo! We do one thing, and that is measure empathy in big companies and find out where they're good and not so good.
Hi, I'm Daniele Fiandaca. I am co-founder of Creative Social, and I have my own consultancy called Mutant. But the reason I'm here, believe it or not, it's not a joke, but I am actually also co-founder of Token Man, which is an initiative to get men into the gender diversity discussion.
How good is that name, Token Man?
It's great.
Genius.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here in Monaco. I'm Emer Coleman. I do a number of things. I'm an associate with EY in London, helping them and their clients look at the impact of digital technology and new business models in the digital economy. I also have my own company called Dsrpen Limited, which kind of does what it says in the tin, really looking, as I say, most recently around the issue of technoethics and the kind of ethical underpinnings of new business models in the digital economy.
Great. So I wanted to just start out by drawing a parallel between, this current revolution and the previous three. The first one having started in the 1700s, then we moved to the late 19th century, then the mid-60s, and the blocks of time that, they took to get from one to the next, and importantly, the role of women and how women's rights evolved in each of them. My question, which maybe this is unconscious bias, but I'm going to direct to the token man. But my question is, in this current revolution, given the sheer pace and rate of change that's occurring in it, is that change going to be good for women in business in terms of closing the gap that we know to be 120 years in the labor workforce?
So, I was surprised when I heard that the gap, that they're suggesting the gap would widen. Certainly if I look in the developed countries. Kevin Kelly from Wired magazine talked about this revolution. He said that, especially when you look at something like AI, what we're going to see is an economy that's driven by creativity as opposed to routine. And for someone that runs something called Creative Social, that's quite a good thing. And I definitely believe creativity is the future of business, the world, everything. So, and I've just come off the back of running an experiment called the Great British Diversity Experiment, where we looked at, and I believe diversity fuels creativity. More diverse teams also lead to better business. I think that's just a fact. But when we did the Great British Diversity Experiment, one of the big findings we found that the type of leaders, we had 150 people, we put people into teams, and we had mentors. There were three types of mentors. There was the mentor that said, okay, I'll just leave you and you do what you want, and we'll just let it flow. That was a disaster. There was the mentor that said, okay, I'm going to put my stamp on this. That was a disaster because their differences didn't come out. The mentors that were really successful were the ones that facilitated. And so for me, and I know Belinda will talk about on the empathetic side, for me, if I look at the future leaders are going to be facilitators and people that have strong empathy skills. And certainly from my experience, those women tend to be better at that. So if I was going to take a logic flow, I really do believe that the future leaders are going to be women. And I think that's going to change a lot of what some of the issues that we're seeing within the workforce.
Okay. So Emer, I know you said that one of the biggest barriers to women starting businesses is access to funding. And Anne, you said that your son has a 70% greater chance of getting funding than your daughter, simply because of his gender. Bloomberg did a study a couple of weeks ago where we showed that when women do raise funds, they raise 30% less than men. Yep. So for every 100 million that men raise, women raise 77 million. My question is, who are the investors in that 77 million, and what does their light bulb moment teach us about how we can change perceptions around female entrepreneurs?
So thankfully there are a few good men in the investors. If we look at the investor population in general, when it comes to venture capital, only about 7% of venture capitalists are women. And that is a recent study again from Crunchbase. They studied from 2010 to 2015 the women partners in the top 100 firms in VC across the world, so it's not just US. And then they also said, okay, when it comes to seed capital, that early stage capital and angel investing, there's about 15% of angels globally are women. And so that's a problem. We are 50% of the population, if not more, and actually we're only accessing 7% of the total capital. Why? We're in 2016. It's just crazy. Now so I believe that this does come down to unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is something that you believe based on a perception. It's not true, okay? It's something that you think it's true, but it's not. And I believe that bias is in the heads of both the male investors, but also women, because they go to this thing called pattern recognition. They're going to tend to invest in what they know, what they feel comfortable with, which tends to be white, young, male. It's not a woman, diverse person. So the few guys who get it, and I think that there are, thankfully, the guys who get it, when I interview them, they say to me, Anne, it's simple. Adam Quinton, he's an angel investor in New York. He said, Anne, I want to make money. That's why I invest in women entrepreneurs. So I want to make money. Why? Because, Kauffman Foundation, they found research that said that women-led technology firms had 35% higher return on investment and 12% higher revenue than male-led tech firms. So we're actually, and that's on a third of the capital, okay? So we're actually a good deal. And then Dave McClure, who is one of the lead, the founder of 500 Startups, big global icon in acceleration and seed capital, he says, I want to invest in the biggest untapped resource, namely women and minority-led companies. So the guys who get it, they can see it's actually a question of arbitrage. They're like, okay, the rest of the guys don't get it. Brilliant. This is a fabulous opportunity for us to actually gain ground. So,
and that's a fantastic, data point, 35% higher returns. I mean, hello. I mean, why is that message so hard to penetrate?
I think that statistic came out, 3 years ago. So it's starting to come out and shared in the media across the world. But, we need to shout it out, scream it out. And because often guys and investors, they want the hard facts in the business case. So we need to share. We need more advocates. We need more people saying, look, we need to change. There is hard data. In the same way we're measuring the impact of women on boards and their impact on the bottom line, there's also data to say that having more women and more diverse founders does actually give you a better return.
I just make a point on that, because I think those stats are really shocking. But what's interesting is those stats have been around, and the lack of women on boards. We all know the stats, and the fact is it's not working. The rational argument is not working. Do you know what the number one influence? So they did a study in Denmark. The number one influence on white male CEOs on promoting women. What do you think that was? Their daughter, and the eldest daughter, because men place more ambitions on their oldest daughter. I'm second, I'm the youngest, it doesn't apply to me. But I think the point I'm making is that often it's so complicated and it's so personal. And when you listen to Anne, those stats are so shocking. But actually, I think we need different types of arguments because the current arguments are just not working.
And that's why I said in my TEDx talk, I said, I can't stand the fact that it is an unequal playing field for my daughter who's 14 and my son who's 12. And there was a fabulous study done by MIT Harvard in 2014 where they gave the same slides to different sets of investors. The only difference between the two sets of investors was that one was being read voiceover with a male voice, and the other was being read the same text with a female voice. And guess what? When people asked, the researchers asked, which company are you most likely to invest in? Basically, over 70% said the male one, and it was the exact same pitch.
So Daniele, tell us, how do we sensitize, a very large majority of the male population to some of these,
It's all on you now.
You've got to change the world in the next few minutes.
Listen, Koleman was founded out of doing something a better way. I think the biggest issue that I've seen, and listen, I'm a man, and the challenge that we have as men, well, a lot of people with my name think I'm a woman when I turn up, but it's just seen a shock on their face. So it's really odd that I'm a token man now. Someone said it to me beautifully. I was judging for a Women of Tomorrow Awards at the IPA, and one of the winners said to me, I want a world where brothers and sisters both don't have to think about gender. And I thought that was a brilliant insight. I have never had to think about gender. Most men have never had to think about gender. So guess what? We don't think about gender. And so what that means is when we're doing stuff or saying stuff, we're not thinking about it. We're not aware of doing it. So for me, I think we talked about this before. I think it's great I'm on this panel, but I don't think it's great that I'm the token man. I hope, last year I understand there weren't any men on the panel. Next year I hope there's 2 men on the panel. The change for me is getting men into the conversation. That's and again, women aren't in the minority in the workplace, but they are in the minority at a senior position in a lot of industries. No minority has ever created change without support from the majority. So we have to get more and more men into that conversation. That's our mission. Right. How we make that spread and quickly, that's kind of the problem we're trying to work out at the moment.
Fair enough. Emer,
and I agree with all of that, but I also think it's important for women as well to understand the distinction between mentors and sponsors. So very often women will say, I need a mentor, I'd like to have a mentor to progress in my career. And actually mentors talk to you, and that's wonderful. But sponsors talk about you, and very often men tend to have sponsors rather than mentors. So men who are talking about them, who are providing them with opportunity. And I think it's about looking for those and asking for those kind of sponsorship. I think women have to do that. I'll share this confidentially if I can do that in a room this size. But I was asked... Sorry?
I'm a reporter.
But just by way of anecdote, I was appointed as chair of the Open Data Governance Board in Ireland, which is advising the Irish government on its open data strategy. And there's a public appointments commission, and they contact you and they say, would you put your name forward for this, right? And they do this with various people, and then there's a selection process. And I said, okay. And I wrote my letter, and I had my CV, and I thought, something, I'm guessing I know more about this subject than a lot of people. And if they appoint some bloke as chairman who doesn't know as much as I do, I'll go mad. So I emailed him and I said, I'd be very happy to serve at the discretion of the minister, but I'd rather be chair. Send. But I think it's about stepping up and asking to look for those opportunities and sponsorship.
Belinda.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick on Daniele's point about children as well, because actually, did you make the point about...
No, we talked about it before.
We talked about it before. Because I do think, and I've got a son and a daughter, and with I was chatting to you, Jackie, about this, and with my son, my husband will say, let's play Minecraft, and with my daughter, he'll say, let's go and watch My Little Pony. And I do think as young, and the whole bossy thing, and that was brilliant where Beyonce said, I'm the boss, the whole anti-bossy thing. But I do think we really need to think about that as children and really start young, because that is where we see so much of that coming out. And I see it without realizing it. I'll say to my daughter, oh, you look pretty. And I'll say to my son, oh, you're so clever. You don't even realize it. So I think being really aware of it. The second point, though, is I really think we should change the debate. I can see with my clients, as soon as you say the word diversity, a lot of them roll their eyes. I mean, literally, we need to find more interesting ways to have this debate. When we stopped, the name Lady Geek, it really put us in a box, actually. And some of it was good because it was niche. But actually, when we started to talk about empathy and how do you bring more empathy into recruitment, part of that is women, into promotions, promoting women, it just gave us a phenomenally different lens to look through the problem at. So I do think it's up to us, everyone in this room, to actually think about how can we change the debate away from diversity into more engaging things that actually have more of a commercial performance and an impact on companies.
So that actually leads nicely into my other point, because you have the disparity, the inequality equation, but you also have the other side, which is that women, we don't naturally gravitate toward the techie parts of tech. Like computer science or code. Tech jobs are the fastest growing segment of the US labor market, but the gender gap in computing science has worsened since the 1980s. It's another great stat from Girls Who Code. 1.4 million jobs are available in computer-related fields. Women are on track to fill just 3% of that.
Shocking.
So we use tech, but we don't embrace tech. So to your point about starting young, how do we get that more into our, gender from a young age?
So I think there is some truth in the fact that there are certain brain types that are attracted to technology. So Professor Baron Cohen talks about this a lot, that, boys, or systemizers as he calls them, are much more attracted to logic, hierarchy, and analysis, and a system. Girls, statistically on average, are more empathic and they respond better to other people's needs. So there is some evidence of that. But as you say, I mean, those stats are so shocking. If you take what we call the geek nations, so in India, 30% of the technology workforce is female. In Hungary, it's about 45%. So clearly, it isn't a male-female thing. What that tells you is the things that I do with my own children without realizing it, and I'm guilty of it, actually influence what career choices our young women take. And, we do a lot of work in schools, and the perception of people who work in technology is pizza-guzzling nerds who cannot get girlfriends. I guess the question, though, to what do you do about that? What we found is these very small things that you can change are about helping young women feel that they belong. They belong in a particular industry, so they can be very small things. I mean, there's a lot of research done. Even a poster of a powerful woman can help women deliver a better speech. There's lots of tiny examples that really help women feel that they belong. So I think the issue is one of belonging.
And that actually sort of segues into my next question, which is about role models, and it touches on unconscious bias, because we have women like Sheryl Sandberg, who is in some ways a class unto herself, but on the flip side, we have many more women in some cases, like the Theranos CEO, Elizabeth Holmes, or Marissa Mayer, whose companies are clearly challenged and they kind of get blamed for it. The question is, and Anne, love to hear your view. Do people hold women to a different standard when it comes to evaluating performance? And do women ourselves hold each other?
Ask you, what do you think? There's a double standard. We were talking about the American elections last night at length. We don't need to say there is a huge double standard. So yes, there is. And so what can you do for this, to combat this unconscious bias? We are held accountable. Basically, even, we need to prove ourselves even more. There's one young woman investor called Elizabeth Galbut. She set up SoGal Ventures in her college in Johns Hopkins University. She set up a fund, with university students. And I've interviewed her, and I'm going to be publishing it. You'll see it in the HuffPost very soon. And she said basically that she had trouble when she set up that fund. She set up with 2 male co-partners. And she had trouble herself getting taken seriously by her 2 co-partners in the beginning. And she even had one investor who came up to her and said, "Oh, you've set up a fund. Isn't that cute?" She's 26. Isn't that cute? So there is a real issue with the unconscious bias. Now, we can't go around and bash all the men. This is not a question about bashing all the men. And there's also about saying, you know, we women, we need to kind of become conscious of it as well. Sometimes we can be holding ourselves back. And I've found that a lot with the women entrepreneurs I've interviewed about their funding journeys and about their challenges when it comes to funding. One of the big issues is they don't ask for enough money. So when they're looking for money the first round, they kind of gravitate to this magic number of 500,000. It doesn't matter if it's dollars or anything else. It's 500K. I've seen women pitching in the US, Latin American women entrepreneurs, and across Europe. But the thing is, you ask them, how long is that going to last? And they say, well, 12 months. And if you ask investors, they say, you've got to raise 18 to 24 months. And what's the problem? Women tend to be, again, we can't say everybody. These are tendencies. They tend to be uncomfortable saying, I need $1 million to fund my business. So we got to get better at asking, and we can't put all the blame on the guys because it is unconscious, exactly like you said. There's this male model of business that's been around for hundreds of years. You don't see, you don't feel it the way we do. And you don't consciously go out to exclude us in conversations or to talk over us. But when you look at, it's kind of crazy. There's a limiting thing. Coming back to the developers, there was a recent article about the quality of code. I don't know if you read it, and they looked on GitHub, where it holds all the code, and they said that they actually analyzed the best code, and guess who did it? The women coders, because it's hidden, and so they don't feel they're in competition with the guys. They're just there to do a bloody good job. So there's something around, yes, we need to open the hearts and minds of men, but also of ourselves, women, and to not hold ourselves back.
I want to leave some time for Q&A, but I just want to get one other question in, and it's about automation. Because it's true that, Klaus Schwab of WEF says that, the fourth industrial revolution is going to generate, great benefits and challenges in equal measure. But it's also, the concern is that it's going to exacerbate inequality differences, and that's going to be particularly challenging. And when you think about automation, you think about digitization of tasks, particularly in the service industries where a lot of women make up the workforce, artificial intelligence. You have to wonder as well, is the concern overstated? Daniele, you had some thoughts on this. What do you think?
Well, listen, I think that, the world's going to change enormously in the next 20 years. And it goes back to what I said before, if you've got a routine job, your job is at risk. It's as simple as that. So what I think you need to do if you're sitting there, you have to look at two things. One is creativity. How can, so we're coming at this problem of gender equality, trying to bring my experience of creativity, innovation, to try and find different ways of doing things. I think the second one is the empathy point. I think it's really, you look at new businesses, and unfortunately at this point in time, I'm not sure whether I hope it does change, but we are certainly seeing, if you look at Gen Z, if you look at the people that are coming through that are going to be 25% of the population in the next 4 years, they're looking at the world in a very different way. They're not money driven. Purpose for them is really important. And I think the minute we start to see a switch where businesses start putting more importance on purpose over profitability, I think we'll see a very different world. And I think that's where women have a huge opportunity. But I think in the meantime there's still a lot of work to do. And I think again, I wouldn't talk about developing countries. I've got no idea. But I could see anyone that's in a routine task. I could see there being real risk to their jobs in the next 5 to 10 years.
Emer, do you share the view in terms of women?
Yeah, but I think one of the most worrying things for me is that, I think it was Mark Andreessen said, software is eating the world. So fundamentally, our world is being engineered. That's what our future is going to be underpinned by data and technology. And so the lack of women in that industry is really worrying because they're literally coding the future for their fellow men and women. And so if you look at something like Apple Health, which is supposed to be the metrics for everything for your health, except it isn't because there isn't anything about periods or menopause or babies because there wasn't a single female engineer on the team. And that matters because they're coding our future. And so if you have 75% of the coding of the future going on that is male, I think that's a really worrying statistic, right? So I think we're going to be disadvantaged in lots of ways because in the same way as you have fantastic medical development. So there's a French company who have, a synthetic heart. Fantastic, except it's modeled for 80% men. It only fits 20% women. Yeah. right? Because women are a different size, their heart sizes are different. So the lack of women at the table, at the core face of engineering, is of deep concern to me. And I think there would be disadvantages there, that would be quite profound.
And but on the same side, I actually think that's a massive opportunity. You're going back to your point. I mean, that for me is that, and again, the reason we did the Great British Diversity Experiment, because famously, 5 years ago, 3% of creative directors in advertising were women. And yet women hold something like, in some major categories, even in the car category, women hold 60% of purchasing decisions. And if you actually look at women, when they see advertising, go, does that really resonate with me? The answer is no. And so there's a huge gap at the moment. So for me, I actually see that as a massive opportunity. And I think for me, coming back to bringing the men in the conversation, it is at the moment, for rightly or wrongly, there are the men in the situation that can make that change, that can start, if you look at someone like Apple, I used to be a massive Apple fan. I've worked for Samsung for 3 years, so I'll just say that straight away. But, I think Apple are in real trouble. Yeah, and so hearing stories like that, if I'm Tim Cook, I'm changing my team straight away. Because, that's how you're going to differentiate yourself in this modern world.
Well,
so
that's why he brought in, what's her name, Angela.
Yes.
Thank you, Angela Arendt. So who, relaunched the whole Burberry brand and the consumer side of things. But, yeah.
So I wondered if anybody had any questions to what I think is a pretty interesting topic. If you could raise your hand and identify yourself.
Any stories?
Yeah.
There must be a few.
Yeah, I would think so.
Hey, I'm actually from tech industry. I'm not a coder. I was just wondering that if we talk about tech industry, do we only talk about those who are in the technical side, or do we talk about all the people who are involved in the tech industry?
That's a really good question. I think you're right, it's broader, because technology is enabling all the other industries, and that's where the disruption is coming for. And I think the future definition of tech and women in tech is actually all of tech, and tech-enabled companies. So I am a female founder, I'm a non-techie, and it's definitely a challenge then, because we speak different languages, developers speak a different language to us. But definitely, I think tech is in the broad sense, tech-enabled businesses, and that's what's going to be a huge source of innovation and creativity for the world.
Yeah, I could just say we do a lot of ed boards with chief executives, every week, and if it's consumer, healthcare, cars, it really is all about tech right now. And you ask them what their biggest challenge right now, it's keeping up with that part of that is part of their strategy going forward.
Can I just add? Oh no, go on.
No, because I just think that in a lot of cases it's about the company, like how much do they, if it's a tech company, yes, there's a tendency to hire a lot of men because it is tech driven, but then there's the other side of like how much they want to have women in the company, because in our company I think it's at about 30% women, 70% men. A lot of the women are working in admin roles, marketing, designers, things like that. That's not so technical, but still, there's a lot, we value a lot of just also hiring females in the company. So just my personal view that it depends a lot about the company.
Yeah.
Can I just add something to that? Because I think it builds on Emer's point, which is actually, though, you do need women creating and developing the products so that they are fit and useful to women. I think with the schools that we've worked in, what we've found is where we do talk about things like wearable technology, robotics, we have got a lot more girls interested in technology. And the perception is that they are going to be sitting in a darkened room doing binary code and ordering pizza. So a big part of this is the perception, but I do think in schools, and we find the specific age is where we lose girls is age 13. That is crucial in terms of choosing career choices. So I think bringing in the creativity in terms of what it brings to girls and some of the careers you can get from technology are really what the messages we need to be focusing on.
And the girls and the young women get motivated by tech because of what it can do.
Yes.
So men are like, they can be better and so on. It's a different way of looking at it. And girls and women get more motivated. What can I do thanks to tech? And that's how we can bring more women and girls into it.
Definitely.
And I think it's important not to reinforce stereotypes as well. So you have traditionally women working in technology companies who may be doing marketing. And it's a bit like, where do you want the power to be? So if I'm in Hollywood and I'm a director, got a lot of power, I'm likely to be male.
Yeah.
Right? So what I want to see in the technology industry is that those stereotypes are not the women do the admin and the marketing and the men do the code.
Yeah.
Because you own the code, you own the world. And I want women to own the world in the same way. I don't want them just talking about the world, right? I want them owning it and designing it, co-designing it with their male counterparts. And I think we see the same stereotypes happening where women say, I want to work in tech, so I'll be a marketeer, right? I want them saying, I want to work in tech, I'm going to be an engineer.
But I mean, there are some anomalies. I mean, we just interviewed Steve Hatch, who's the MD of Facebook. Go and read it. I mean, I think Facebook, is a tech company. I think they're doing some fantastic work in terms of inclusion, in terms of purpose. So they've done a lot of work in terms of they no longer talk about purpose. They don't talk about culture anymore. They've banned the word culture. They talk about values. Because they, and go and have a look at what something like Facebook's. They've completely opened up their unconscious bias training to anyone to go and look.
Google
it's open
as well.
source. So I think there are some bright stars within that tech world that are leading the way.
They are definitely leading or they want to. I mean, the fact that they've even published their diversity figures, the financial industry hasn't. Very few industries have even published their figures. So they are trying to change it, but I think those stats that you said, 3%, do we want that for our daughters? Don't we want them to think that any career is possible? I mean, it is shocking.
I wanted to follow up on that, but I first wanted to see if there are other questions. Yes?
Thank you. Harriet Minter from The Guardian. Hello.
We love your column.
Yeah, we want to give a shout out to Harriet, because we all love Harriet.
Thank you.
She's really driving this agenda for The Guardian.
And watch her TED Talk as well. She did one.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please do. I actually wanted to ask, and I'm so sorry to ask an existential and not in any way your fault question, but I'm wondering if perhaps this is the wrong audience to be talking to. So I feel like this audience probably knows that there should be more senior women in every industry. And the audience that probably doesn't know it are maybe the entrepreneurs coming in later in the week. Because I'm having a look around the room and I've so far counted 6 guys. Hello, you're wonderful, we love you.
Great point.
But if they're the people leading it, how do we get this panel onto those agendas?
Through that. Through live streaming, through the cameras, through all that stuff as well.
Yeah, but I think it's a really good point.
Great point.
Because they're not watching. Because they're not watching.
Yeah, they're not watching.
It's not. I think it's very frustrating. The reason I'm doing this in advertising because I love advertising. I think I'll probably give up in 6 months because I've kind of given up on advertising. And I think there are other industries that I think are embracing it far more. And you can only to a certain extent. It's how do you break through to the people that aren't converted, because they're the ones that, as I said, are the ones in the positions that can make that difference. So I totally agree with you.
I do, just to pick up on Anna's point as well, I do think it's really important for women to have lots of digital content, because in my experience, this is purely anecdotal, but women are much more reluctant to go for public speaking opportunities, which then that can be put onto YouTube, which then can be shared socially. So if we're not out there, talking to the world and making sure our content is out there. So, conferences that are tech conferences, usually it's all male because they're saying, oh, we can't find any women, because, of course, when you search, they don't come up in the same way. So we've got to look at algorithmically what's happening as well. So if you search, I'm sure you have CEO, just put the word CEO into Google. It's nothing but men. It's all images. Just put in CEO images, right? There's 2 women, actually, a couple of pages in, and one is called Barbie CEO. So the representation of the world through search to us is also something, so how women promote their digital content on the web is just really important.
So I would just say we've got to change the conversation, and we've got to change who we're having that conversation with. I think we can do it one small nudge at a time. Interestingly, I was having a discussion with an MD of a bank, and she was talking about tights. And she said, I was saying, how does it play out in this bank, which is very male? And she said, tights. And I said, oh, okay, what do you mean? What do you mean by tights? And she said, well, she was from a different country. She said, I got here and all the women wear tights and it's a boiling sunny day. And I said to the woman, you've got a ladder in your tights. She said, I can't take my tights off. And she said, well, why can't you take your tights off? Well, because I'm not supposed to, because I'm a woman and I'm not supposed to. And this MD said, well, where's the rule that says you have to wear tights? Now, there was no rule here, but my point is that often it's really subtle, really small things that say to women, you have to act a certain way, you have to be a certain thing. And I think the more subtleties, the more nuances we can look for, I think the more we'll be able to change things and get to the right audience, which I think is your point, which is a brilliant one.
I want to know who the woman is how old the woman is who won't take off her tights. I take my tights off all the time. I
don't know that information.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more question. Oh, lots of hands. Who's first? 3.
I don't have any tights on.
Thank you very much. My name is Elena Tarasenko. I was a finalist of Entrepreneur of the Year in 2014 in Russia and Businesswoman of the Year of 2014 in Russia as well.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Actually, I met for breakfast with 2 lovely ladies and Belinda, and I promised to tell my impression of this panel. It's a fantastic panel. I'm saying that in loud. And thanks a lot for this subject. Basically, I have a very practical question, and I think that everybody can add her or his thoughts to that. What is practical way to encourage women to take responsibility, to encourage women to talk to each other, to encourage women to take responsibilities for new job, whether it is an application and face sheet, as Daniele said, or we can start from childhood, or we can talk about mentorship. If each of our speakers can point 2 or 3 instruments that can help women to grow, that would be very good. And maybe EY can take leadership and implement those instruments into real life. Thank you.
Good question.
So I'm going to start. So one is I've actually slightly is don't make it. One thing is don't make assumptions about public speaking. I mean, everyone says, I hear it quite a lot from work, but I hate the idea of public speaking. I promise you, no word of lie. 7 years ago, I hated public speaking. I hated getting in front of 70 people. It happens both for men and women. The reality is, you have to. I think I've just read Sheryl Sandberg's book, which is Lean In, and I thought I have to say I thought it was brilliant. It was very insightful. I think most men should read it. But I also think a lot of the things were true. I think people have to. People do have to spend more time getting out there and getting in front of people. Maybe it does come more naturally to men. I don't know, but there needs to be more of that.
I would say, other than don't wear tights, I would say failure. I think, if you think about software development, and we've got technical people here, if you think about software development and how you progress, it's all an iterative process. Okay, so you kind of fail. Every time you fail, you're one step closer to getting it right. And I was talking about celebrating failure, and I mentioned it to a male colleague, not Daniele. This was a different talk. And my male colleague said to me, do not talk about failure. And I said, well, why? I failed many times in my life. Some of the businesses I've done haven't worked so well, blah, blah, blah. And he said, just don't talk about failure. And I think as women, the one thing, to answer your question, Helena, the one thing we can do is think it's, to talk about failure and think about it as something that is okay, because it is one step closer to getting it right. So my thing would be celebrate failure.
So I think my thing would be coming back to the mentoring. You're a fantastic role model, so seek out those women who have succeeded and those men who have succeeded and ask for help. And I think that's something that guys find much easier than women tend to do. And a mentor can help really, make your journey go faster because they've been through the ropes. So they have things to help you with. They have their network to help you with as well. So I think seek out mentors and be a role model yourselves. You are all role models in this room. So, take that on. Take accountability for being a role model and inspiring other women on their journey. I think that's really, really important.
I would say too, I think it's really important to engage men more in the debate, because I know certainly as a younger woman in business, I would never, I was very, very conscious of, gender's not an issue, I'm the same as the man, I don't want to talk about this. But actually I think we do men a disservice by doing that, because I think they don't quite clearly understand sometimes how critical the issue is. So for example, I now ask male colleagues not to go on panels at conferences where there are no women represented. Yeah. And I say, and if I find they do, I send them an email saying, you really going to do that, right? So I think there's an opportunity there to draw on a more supportive a role for men to play, so that they understand better the challenges, because we're not going to solve this ourselves.
And I think
has to be
to that point, that's really important, is point out the organisations who are having those all-male panels and the events that do them. I remember a few years ago at Web Summit, I would get the official invitation, and they'd keep announcing new speakers. I would ping it back immediately, where are the women, where are the women, where are the women? And the first year I went to Web Summit was 2013, and they had a women's lunch. It didn't even feature on the programme or on the website. And we had CTO of Cisco, Padma Warrior at the time, as one of the keynote speakers in the women's lunch. And that really annoyed me. I said, we're not aside, we're like much more important than that. So I think when you see, and people are doing that more, they're shouting out when they see all male panels or in organisers. And now guess what? This is the first year that Web Summit have offered 10,000 tickets to women in tech for free. So, things are moving forward, but you have to keep pushing. They still only have, I think, 17% of their speakers, of their 200 and something speakers, are women. So, and the highlight of one of the Web Summits was having the lady from Desperate Housewives, Eva Longoria. She's beautiful, but I mean, that was a brilliant keynote speaker, and she does great charity work, but it's still not sending the right message.
So I totally agree with your point. The only thing I'd add to that is also, if you're a female being invited to a panel about diversity, don't accept it as all female speakers.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
and I would just, as a small little point to that, there's a great little app called Learn to Search, which was developed by two Irish women in Dublin to help male technology conference people understand how to search the internet to find women, right? Because it's really funny. You can just test it out. But if you Google Learn to Search, so every time I see male technology conferences now, I now tweet them the Twitter handle of Learn to Search and say, have a look, honestly, you'll be amazed. There's women out there.
I just wanted to follow up real quickly before we wrap. Belinda, you made a point about Facebook and some of the big tech companies, making an effort, at least having the discussions, and it's true that, several big tech companies have started disclosing, their workforce demographics, and some of the VCs are at least starting to talk about it. That said, Emer, we discussed this over the phone, that how much of this are you seeing the silver lining in this when you're on the ground, in Silicon Valley, or when you're at these tech conferences? Is there that silver lining, or is it?
Well, I have to say, I gave up on Dublin Web Summit because that amount of hubris was just doing me in.
Yeah,
I just couldn't take another male striding around with an earpiece shouting. And, to be quite honest, for my startup, I thought, this is just hubris. I don't need to be here to do business.
Exactly.
Right?
Because all the business was done in the networking in the pubs and their events outside.
And that's what you felt there. You felt, this is not for me, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm a little bit pessimistic, I guess, more pessimistic about the future. But I do think, the opportunity is there. I don't think we realize how hard we're going to have to push and how quickly we're going to have to get on that task, right? And it's going to escalate very quickly over the coming years, right? Exponentially. And I just think we need to get on it.
Okay. In our final couple minutes, the floor actually asked a very good question that I was going to use as my closer, but instead I'll close with this and ask you to keep it to just a couple sentences. But imagine I'm a woman. I didn't fail. I've succeeded. I have my business. It's established. What's your one piece of advice for developing it and taking it forward?
Ask for more money. Number one.
Ask for more money.
Ask for more money. When you're raising funds, when you're selling, even with your pricing strategy, there was an interesting article that came out last week, and Mark Andreessen said that's the one thing that startups get wrong. They start on freemium models and start really cheap, and then they have to claw back to try and make margins. So ask for more money.
How much more money should we be asking for?
I think at least 50%. At least 50%.
All right.
At least. Because some of the angels I've interviewed, they say, Anne, when I see 3-year projections from the guys, I cut them in half. When I see a woman's, I multiply it by 2. Because a woman's projection, she will only put on paper what she knows she can do. Because otherwise she thinks she's lying. That's the difference, even though she's not.
Belinda? Sorry, we're just...
Ask for more money.
I love that. Ask for more money. I love that. And that is also just a separate on the negotiation, why we have a gender pay gap. I mean, I have guys who come and see me and say, in my team, I've delivered this, I've done this, and I'm amazing. And then I had a woman who was one of my top performers say, and I asked her how much of a bonus she thinks she should get. And she said 30%. And she's like, I haven't done this, and I haven't done that, and I should have done that. So ask for more money in every situation, I think is the message. Yep. My only other thing would be to say no. I think as women, we say yes to too many things. And by saying no to things, by saying no to people, no to certain opportunities, it actually is more defining than the things we say yes to. So say no.
Okay, we're actually kind of out of time, but real quick.
I would say no. I would tie in with that. I'd slightly reword it. I'd say know your value.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, understand your value. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand that at the moment. Like diversity is one of the biggest issues, and actually you going into businesses, you can really transform businesses. And once you do that, you're just at a different negotiation point. Yeah.
And I just finish by saying don't expect to be 100%. Men never expect to be 100%, but women always expect to be 100%. It's okay to be 75% when you're moving forward, just to have that faith in yourself that you're going to be competent enough and capable enough to bridge any gaps.
Thank you for a good...
May I say one last shout out? I am currently looking for wonderful mentors to mentor women entrepreneurs from Global Invest Her. So if you're interested in being a mentor and offering up 2 hours of your time over 6 months remotely, please come to me afterwards. Just had to do that ask. And ask more. This is ask for more money and have a good ask at every turn.
Thank you for a very nice panel. Can we get a round of applause, please?
Thank you, Jackie.